Hey everyone! Let's take a quick trip back in time to meet one of the most creative minds ever, Leonardo da Vinci. Welcome back to my channel, it's Miss V. Did you know that his full name was actually Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci? That literally translates to Leonardo, son of Piero from Vinci. So da Vinci isn't a last name, it just tells us where he was from. So here is the twist that changed art history as we know it. Because Leonardo's parents were not married, the laws of the time strictly prohibited Leonardo from attending a university to become a lawyer, which had been his father's profession. Since he wasn't allowed to sit in a classroom memorizing old books, learning how to read in Latin and Greek, or reading other historical texts, he had to learn differently. He rejected simply reading about the world, which was a very common practice during this time, and instead went outdoors to observe nature directly. He meticulously studied things like the way light strikes a leaf, or the mechanics of a bird in flight. This revolutionary approach changed art history forever. He ceased imitating other artists, which was a very common practice during this time, and instead, he began to imitate nature itself. Leonardo da Vinci ultimately demonstrated that achieving artistic greatness requires the mind of a scientist. Now let's delve deeper into Leonardo's early life prior to becoming an artist. Now, Leonardo ended up moving to the quiet countryside to live with his uncle Francesco. This became a very pivotal moment for Leonardo. Instead of being in a classroom and taking lessons, his uncle allowed him to spend his days outside exploring the hills of the village that he lived in. Leonardo's textbook, so to speak, was the school of nature, where he honed in his drawing skills by keenly observing birds, insects, and the movement of water. At age 15, Leonardo started training with a well-known artist named Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence. In Verrocchio's workshop, Leonardo learned how to paint, sculpt, and design, and he was really good at it. This is the landscape of the Arno Valley, and this is his earliest dated work. He drew this on August 5th, 1473, at the age of 21. Look at how he handles the horizon. He's already experimenting with atmospheric perspective. Now this makes the distant hills fainter and less detailed than the foreground to create vast depth. He didn't just draw what he saw, he analyzed how light travels through the air. Although he was still an apprentice, this drawing already shows his deep connection to nature and science. Now, to see his growth as an artist, let's compare that small drawing to the monumental The Last Supper. This isn't just a scene, it's a dramatic study in human emotion and composition. Now, in this painting, Leonardo captures the exact moment Christ says he will be betrayed. But look at the detail. He refused to use the standard wet plaster technique of this time, which required fast work. Instead, he invented an experimental dry technique using oil and tempera. This allowed him to blend shadows and perfect the expressions over years, grouping the disciples into emotional trios and directing your eye right to the center of the figure, which is Jesus Christ. Of course, we have to talk about the Mona Lisa. What makes this painting legendary isn't just her smile, it's Leonardo's amazing technique. He used a technique called sfumato, which is Italian for smoked. Look at her eyes and the corners of her mouth. The edges are so softly blended that you can't see the brush strokes. This creates that mysterious, shifting expression. Notice her hands. They appear lifelike because Leonardo focused heavily on human anatomy to model them perfectly. Finally, look at the background. The hazy, distant landscape uses atmospheric perspective, making distant objects appear light and blue. This technique adds incredible depth to the painting. Leonardo wasn't just an artist, he was also an inventor. He sketched flying machines, underwater gear, and even robots, way ahead of his time. These notebooks are a window into the Renaissance's most restless mind. But to read them, you need a mirror. Leonardo wrote almost entirely in reverse. Was it an early form of encryption to protect his inventions from thieves, or just a hack for a left-handed artist? Either way, it forced the viewer to look harder, requiring a literal reflection to see the truth. Now let's look at a work from his later life, called St. John the Baptist, which ultimately shows his final art style. Here, Leonardo pushes his signature technique, sfumato, to the extreme. Look closely. There are no outlines. The figure isn't drawn. It is built entirely out of soft shadows and gradual blurring. As he got older, Leonardo moved to France in 1516 at the invitation of the young Francis I. Francis gave him a comfortable home and the title of the king's first painter. Leonardo brought 3 of his favorite works with him, including the Mona Lisa, which is why it remains in France to this day. Leonardo da Vinci showed us that being curious and creative can lead to amazing things. So if you love to draw, build, explore, or ask why, you're already thinking like Leonardo. Stay curious, stay creative, be like Leonardo. Thanks for tuning in, my friends, and until next time, Miss V, your media art teacher.